Welcome to Managing a Windows 2012 Server Environment. I'm your instructor, Robert McMillen, and we will be going through the different areas of how to manage a Windows 2012 server and Active Directory. We're going to be using the book from William R. Stanek, Inside Out Windows Server 2012 from Microsoft Press. This is Part 1, Lab 1, and this is the Windows Server 2012 overview. We're going to discuss planning for server usage, licensing, and installation options. Then we're going to go through an actual installation. Planning for server usage. This is very important because you need to know why you're going to be creating this server. What are you going to use it for? And once you know what you're going to use it for, you need to be able to plan to make sure you have enough resources to make that work. Make sure you have the right hardware. Make sure you have enough RAM. The processor speed is up to what is needed to run the programs. So there are certain programs that are built into Windows that you can add. They don't come turned on by default. One is you can make the server a domain controller. A domain controller is the head of the domain, and from there you can control other computers and what they can and cannot do. DNS server, that comes automatically when you install a domain controller, but you could also install a DNS server on a non-domain controller. DNS server stands for Domain Naming Service Server, and that allows you to create a type of management that says this particular name goes with this particular IP address. So that way you only have to know the name, you don't have to know the IP addresses. DHCP, or Dynamic Host Control Protocol, that allows you to have an automatic IP address set up to any computer that requests it. Without DHCP, every computer would have to be statically set, which would be a lot of overhead for an IT administrator. Hyper-V, that is a virtual server service that you can install on your Windows 2012 server, and it allows you to have multiple operating systems all running on one physical box. Remote access such as VPN or remote desktop or VNC. There's all different types of remote access. Well, some of these remote access options are built into Windows. Several different types of VPN, for instance, are built into Windows, and you can access the network remotely when you set those up. Remote desktop, that comes in two different flavors. One is the administration mode, which comes in by default. The other is the application services mode, which allows you to install applications that people can log into the server and access from a thin client or a computer running the remote desktop protocol program. A web server, such as Internet Information Services, can be installed as part of the operating system for Windows 2012. There's no additional cost to that. You just have to choose IIS in the setup of the roles and features, and you can turn your server into a web server. Licensing is another consideration when you are designing what you want to do on your new server. Licensing comes in several different options, such as the per server, per device, or per user. A per server license means that you need a client access license for every connection to that computer or that server. And that could mean more than just a Windows computer. That could be Linux or Unix, a tablet, a phone. You would need a license for each one. Another option is the per device or per user, and that goes on the device itself, such as a Windows device. And Windows device CALs are different from user CALs in that a device CAL allows for a person to log into a computer differently than a user license. So a user license allows the same user to be able to go to any one of a number of computers and log in, whereas a device just allows that one device to log in. So as you can imagine, the per user one is more flexible, so it costs a little bit more. The device one is not as flexible, so it costs a little bit less. Different types of licensing for the product itself. There's retail, which means you can just buy it and install it on a server, and the good thing about that is you can uninstall it and you can move it to another server once that server dies. Open license and volume license are very similar types of licenses, and basically it allows you to use the same license key over and over on multiple servers or workstations if it's that type of license. Enterprise is a license that's typically reserved for organizations that have tens of thousands of users. Microsoft doesn't allow just anyone to have an enterprise license, and that allows you to deploy various different Microsoft products such as Windows Server 2012 to many servers before the key says that it's been registered too many times. Another type of license is the license for remote desktop. As mentioned earlier, there's two different types of modes. The administration mode is free, it comes with it, but it only allows 2 concurrent connections. The application server version of remote desktop requires a client access license for every single user that connects. Installation options. Versions of Windows 2012, there are now just 4 of them: Foundation, Essentials, Standard, and Data Center. Foundation only allows 1 processor and not very many users, so up to 15 users, so it's for a very small office. Essentials allows you to have 2 processors and up to 25 users. Standard can allow thousands of users and multiple processors, so there's no problem there. And Data Center has an unlimited amount of users, as well as you can have an unlimited amount of virtual machines. Of course, that costs a lot more. You can do a couple different types of installations during the install. One is an upgrade from a previous version. The other is a clean install. An upgrade will allow you to keep your same programs and settings in place when you do the upgrade, and you can do that from 2008 to 2012. You cannot do that from 2003 or anything older. A clean installation wipes out any previous program settings, so you only want to do that on a brand new server or a server that you don't need any previous settings continued to run. So those are the 2 different types of installations. Think carefully before you decide which one you want to do. Full server with GUI versus server core. This is an option when you do the installation. It will ask you, do you want to do a full server or do you want to do a server core? A full server is the traditional server that you may be used to, where you can see all the different menu items and install all the different consoles. Server core just has command line only. You get a command prompt that pops up after installing server core, and from there a wizard will guide you for the types of roles and features you want to install. Server core is very good for servers with limited resources, where you want to save a lot of the RAM and the hard drive space and processors for other types of activities besides just the graphical user interface. There are some pre-installation tasks you would like to consider, such as partitioning, license type, version, CALs, UPS, what type of backup you're going to use, what type of anti-malware you're going to use. Make sure you do the firmware updates. Will you use virtual servers inside the operating system? And hardware requirements that you all want to look at before you do your installation. And these types of ideas of pre-installation tasks are covered in the first portion of the book that was mentioned earlier. So in review, we discussed planning for server usage, licensing, installation options. In our next lab, we're going to discuss network and domain membership with startup and recovery options. So let's go ahead and run through an installation. I've got an installation up and going in a virtual setting, and we'll just go ahead and choose next, and we'll have the option to install now. And from here, it's going to pop up with some different installations. You can do an automated installation, which allows you to pre-answer all of these questions. That makes things go faster. In this case, we're just going to do the regular manual setup. We're going to accept the terms of service, and here's that option between upgrading or choosing new. This is a brand new install, so we're just going to choose custom, and this is also considered a clean install. So we've chosen a 40 gigabyte partition. We'll choose next, and now the software is installing. Once the software is completely installed, we will see a brand new version of Windows 2012, and at that point that will be shown in the labs that are coming up when we get to the next portions. So that is it for our first lab And stay tuned for the next labs that are coming up where we learn more about managing Windows Server 2012.